Yeah, I may have hit a button. All right, it's recording.
Okay,
Good
yeah,
thing one of us is recording a backup.
I know.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to check that before I said anything.
Okay.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, for me, I've always said that there's a better uh, version of Mandy out there if you re-edit the damn thing and you take out all the hallucinogenics. Night House is fine. I understand where it's going, but I wish it would have gotten to the point sooner. This is a tough one. I'm gonna flip a coin. I'm gonna say Night House. I have a tough time with this one. I think they're both really close, and Night House for me just barely squeaks by.
All right, Bede, what do you think?
This is I think The Night House is a great film, but I do absolutely love Mandy with all my heart and soul. And the thing about Mandy is like it is a B movie at heart, like a B action horror revenge film. But I think um, but it has that art house sheen to it that definitely kind of elevates it from just being a B movie.
Right.
And I think Panos Cosmatos just does so much to it that again just sort of elevates the film, and it's emotional, it's insane, and it has a brilliant Nicolas Cage performance at the center of it. And I think to me that's the winner of this bracket. I mean, at least this round is Mandy, so I'm going with that.
What a surprise! Bede voted for Nick Cage.
I know, right?
Never once.
All right, Gabe, what about you? What do you say?
Yeah, I think Mandy is too backloaded with Nick Cage. I really like my Nick Cage at the core of it. You know, I mean, Mandy is an absolutely gorgeous movie, and actually, I've used it as a reference point for some of the projects that I'm working on. You know, me and my cinematographers sit down and watch Mandy. So, I mean, it's a gargantuan accomplishment in a lot of ways, but personal subjective feelings. I was very moved by The Night House. I was really captivated by Rebecca Hall's performance. And to me, horror movies are perfect vehicles to explore grief. I think that's why everybody loves Hereditary so much, you know, grief, trauma. And that one spoke to me, man. And it really haunted me. So I will have to go for The Night House.
All right, Jack, what say you?
Short and sweet. 2 words. Cheddar Goblin. Mandy.
All right. Marcus, what do you say?
Yeah, definitely Mandy. It's definitely one of my favorite movies. It's a indomitable journey into like righteous fire and brimstone. Not to mention it's a fantastic revenge film. Soundtrack's majestic. The imagery is out of this world. I freaking love that movie so much. So yeah, I'm going with Mandy.
All right, Garrett.
Well, Jack made a great case for Mandy, but I love the slow burn aspect of The Night House. I just always love that way of building the tension to something. And Rebecca Hall is just tremendous in that movie. So I'm going Night House.
All right, Matt.
I'll go with The Night House as well. I'm always surprised when I see a haunted house film in any capacity that can speak to me, not in the 1999 haunting sort of way where I want to run out of the theater or put my head through a television. But the Night House kind of reminded me, I call it the horror version of Manchester by the Sea, or the more horrific version, because it's a movie that's not afraid to say that grief, and especially losing someone that you love, is not one of those things you just get over at the snap of a finger. And that was something that at the time when I saw it, I was dealing with personally. So I really connected with that in a way. So I'm going to go with The Night House, and I'm just a huge champion of Rebecca Hall as well. I don't think she gets enough credit for being as great as she is.
All right, and Brian.
I hear everything everybody's saying about The Night House. That her performance turned it around for me with her, because after seeing her in Godzilla versus Kong, trying to convince me she's a professor or scientist wasn't working for me.
But I
Was
can't
anybody's
go
performance in Congress as Godzilla working for you? That's a genuine question.
Cons was
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
A lot better.
All right.
I thought Kong did pretty well.
Yeah, but I can't go against Mandy. The visuals are phenomenal. Nick Cage is phenomenal in it. I disagree with Don, but if you take out all the hallucinogens in it, I don't know if I want to watch the movie.
Right.
So
All right. So Don, what did you pick again? Mandy or
Night
what
House.
Okay.
Yeah, should be
Damn,
tied up.
Oh no.
Fucker. All right. So, I'm a therapist in my real life, so I deal with a lot of people grieving, and so again, this film did hit me, and I think it's interesting that films like The Night House, even films like Smile, which we had last year, we're seeing a trend of using this, this metaphor of grieving or not being able to get past a certain point in your life where you have to move on. There's a lot of denial there. And really, The Night House was one of the ones that really caught my attention early on. So it really struck a chord with me as well. I love Mandy. I mean, I think Mandy was really Nicolas Cage stepping out of that, video on demand purgatory that he was in for years and stepping out of the parody that he had become. Not that he didn't do any more films, not that he didn't do any more films afterwards that were more, him being a parody of himself, but certainly he was getting out of that hole to now, now he's in demand again. Right now he's got a movie coming out in theaters again. So his credibility was certainly starting to be fixed during Mandy, but I got to go with The Night House because The Night House stood with me, and it was something that, I couldn't forget in a long time. So I call it an upset, call it what you want, but The Night House moves on.
That was on your top 5 that year, Pedro.
I loved it.
Yep, I remember that.
Now, with that said, I will say that the whole grieving, metaphor is getting a little long in the tooth. I think we're seeing a lot of these quote unquote elevator horror filmmakers really lean on that too much lately. Because I think since The Night House, we've seen at least 4 or 5 films that are of the same ilk where, people are in denial and there's a lot of stuff going on. And it's all about just, trying to get over it and move on. But for this particular tournament, I'm sticking with The Night House.
All right.
Yeah, and
Trauma
at least 3
is
of those
to
all starred Rebecca
the-
Hall too. So
Yeah.
Trauma is
Right. Good
to
point.
elevated horror what gore is to slasher movies. It's like something that people are starting to throw on the screen.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so now we're gonna move on to, and right away we're gonna hit the buzzer on this one. Near Dark. What the fuck is this movie doing in here?
Who the fuck added that one?
Listen, it's a great film. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a classic, right? But it's definitely not. If we were in high school, it would definitely be in the wrong crowd right now. We would kick it out, go back to the nerds or something.
Come on, Pedro, don't bury the lead, man. Let's just go.
So, anyways, we'll start with Gabe. We'll start with you. Near Dark or The Witch?
Oh, well, see, now I feel trapped because we're talking about the greatest elevated horror movie. I mean, I would absolutely rather Near Dark on any day of the week. I would rather watch
Yes.
Near Dark. That's a fantastic movie. Has some career highlights from actors I love, like Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen. It reinvented the vampire genre, and it did in a clever way. So if you want to stretch and say, well, that elevates it, it's elevated in the sense that when you see where vampire movies were at that time, it was smarter, meaner, had more of a bite than any of those. That being said, I mean, yeah, but The Witch is, it goes on that Mount Rushmore. Robert Eggers goes on that Mount Rushmore with Ari Aster and Jordan Peele. So I feel like my arm has been twisted to go with The Witch, but this is the only circumstance that I would do that with, because that also is not my speed.
All right. Let's go with Bede. What do you say?
Yeah, it's definitely The Witch. Near Dark, great movie, but definitely not elevated horror for me, as brilliantly made as it is. But like what we've already said before, like if we did a Mount Rushmore of elevated horror films, The Witch definitely is up there with, Get Out, Hereditary, and It Follows for me. So it's definitely The Witch.
All right, Don.
Geez, a film that I'm gonna call the buzzer on versus 1C on the Mount Rushmore of the genre. Do I really have to say anything?
All right, let's put a W for Don here, and that's me keeping track of these things. So
Okay.
W, yeah, for which, or is it Vich? I don't know.
Or is
The
it
Vitch.
double V?
The
Yes.
Vich.
Should I put two
La
V's?
Larue.
Okay, let's go down to Jack.
Well, my name is Jack, and I suggested Near Dark for this bracket, and here's why. Here's why. As has been stated so many fucking times in this conversation, elevated horror doesn't mean anything. It
Yes.
does, it has no definition. I don't know what I really don't know what it means. I really don't, because I feel like it's just whatever you think it is at the time, or if it's made by A24. It's one of those. It's always one of those.
Is this a
Sometimes-
protest vote on your part? Is that a protest?
It's not so much a protest vote. It's more just, I feel like I put this on the bracket list because I just wanted to show the hypocrisy of the idea of elevated horror. Because I think that Near Dark, if you moved that movie to today, and if A24 cut a trailer for it, it would look exactly like It Comes at Night or anything else that they've released. But I can't, now that I'm thinking about it, even tell you why that is. It just feels that way, if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, so that being said, I can't vote against The Witch. The Witch is The Witch. It is my vote.
The Witch.
However, I just wanted to say it was put on the list with some thought put behind it, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't really know what that thought is. So
Compelling argument for Near Dark.
I mean, this is not. I agree with everything you said, Jack. At the end of the day, this genre is bullshit, in my opinion. But with that said, I think with Near Dark, the reason why it's troublesome in this bracket or in this tournament is because we could automatically put it in other genres. Like, it could be like a horror film, it could be like an action film, it could even be a Western in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So
I think that's what makes it elevated, though. I think that's literally part of the definition of elevated horror. I think Matt said it before, is that it's not just horror. It falls into multiple genres and could be defined by other genres as well. I think that's part of maybe.
Okay,
what
so
I was
then can
thinking.
you say the same thing about Predator? That's an action
Yes.
horror sci-fi. Is
Yeah.
that elevated horror?
I think under the broad definition of what we're talking about, I think maybe it could be, yeah. Even though I never
Yeah.
would think of it that way, I think somebody could make that argument.
I think elevated horror has to have a subtext to whatever the
Yeah.
threat is. It has to be some sort of metaphor. Like, there has to be like an emotional subtext there. And Near Dark and Predator, both more entertaining than The Witch, in my opinion, aren't exactly aiming for that. It's high octane action, or vampire cowboys, which is amazing, and that's genius. But I think if there is a pattern that we've found throughout this discussion, I think subtext is key.
Agreed.
Alright.
Yeah, there's got to be some. Making it elevated is because there's something underneath the surface for you to look at that you're having to dig out and unearth. It can't just be the stuff that this mixes together 3 or 4 different genres that makes it smarter. If you just blanketly look at it and say, yeah, but there's nothing else underneath it, that kind of just defeats the purpose, and it doesn't really make it elevated. You have to look at it and say, wow, that was smarter than I thought it was. There was this great metaphor involving this ghost that you're using as a stand-in for her inability to move on from her husband, and there's a grief pattern here that she's not processing. I think that's what makes it an elevated horror film. It's not just something that looks like 3 or 4 different things meshed together. It's something that you've got to bury underneath the surface, and it's got to come to the forefront.
All right. Well, this is not a hill I'm gonna die on, because quite honestly, I don't give a fuck. All right, Garrett, what do we got?
Well, if this was best vampire film of all time, I think Near Dark would make at least the final 4 of this entire
Okay.
tournament. That being said, The Witch is one of my favorite movies to come out in the last decade. So I'm going The Witch.
All right, Matt.
I'll be that guy. I'm staking my claim on Near Dark. Pun intended. Here's why.
Nice.
Okay.
I'm gonna double down on what Jack said, because not only did we have to nominate these movies, we also had to give a list. So enough people supported Near Dark for it to be in this tournament to a degree. Is that vampires up until that point were predominantly one of two things. They were mindless monsters or they were entirely seductive. It took Near Dark to really make vampires into characters. Give them different personalities, different distinctions, different desires. And it's elevated because, look, a lot of women weren't directing horror films in the 80s. Hell, a lot of women aren't directing horror films nowadays, at least ones that get, a wide recognition. So I think The Witch is a great movie, but I'm going to say I'll watch Near Dark 10 times before I rewatch The Witch.
There you go.
So I'll go with Near Dark. I'll be the one dissenter. So now Garrett knows how it feels.
We're not done yet here. You could have some company here. Bede, did I get to you? Because I'm drinking right now.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Okay, Brian.
Well, first I got to say it wouldn't be the Horror Returns bracket if we didn't have at least one movie where everybody was like, why the fuck is that movie on the list?
Yeah, Lance.
But after hearing what Jack had to say and then what Matt had to say, I'm gonna jump over on your side of the fence, Matt, and I'm gonna go Near Dark.
Nice.
Persuasion tactics in the house.
Well, it's too late to make a comeback.
Is that
Okay,
it?
and then we got Marcus.
I'm gonna go with The Witch. I mean, I love Near Dark as well. It's definitely another defining vampire movie that just hits all the right notes and does something fresh and interesting with the genre. But I don't know, the Witch just it really does kind of hold that bracket, of what we're all talking about here, especially when it comes to its lighting, its music, production value, cinematography, performances, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with The Witch begrudgingly.
Okay.
Begrudgingly.
Okay. All right. So The Witch takes this bracket here. We're gonna move on to the Baba Dick and the Dark and the Wicked. This is gonna be a hard one. Hopefully, I don't have to vote on this one because this is a hard one for me. But we'll start things off with Don.
Oof. Damn. Babadook is a contender for 1D on the Mount Rushmore for me. I think it was like the very first one, at least in like the modern sense, where it was like retroactively kind of outfitted as to be like the outlier of the genre, and like one of the first ones that really kind of started making people aware that there was something else to the genre instead of just like your standard slasher, ghost film, or zombie film, or whatever else was coming out at that time period. Babadook is always the one that was always like
Everybody's calling it Baba Dick.
the starting point here.
Where
but-
did that start, Jack?
Gee, I wonder.
But goddamn, Dark and the Wicked is, to me, if we were to like rank what I would think of as like what these films are, this to me is like my favorite in the entire style. Out of every film on the list, this is the one that I rank the highest. Yeah, this is the hardest one. Do I give it to the legacy one, or do I give it to the one that I look at as the shining example and my favorite one in this entire outcrop? I gotta say Dark and the Wicked begrudgingly. I understand the Babadook. I appreciate it. It has its merits. I love what it does. The film it kind of teeters here and there for me, but Dark and the Wicked to me it's my favorite in this entire style. It was the one on the bracket that I looked at then was like, yes, I'm glad we're including it. I understand where everyone falls on this one, but I'm going to start off with Dark and the Wicked on this one.
Okay.
All right, another one of the grieving metaphors there. So,
but I think it's the one that does it the best, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go to Bede. What do you say?
Well, this is an easy one for me because I personally think The Dark and the Wicked is a piece of shit.
Oh, some fighting words right there.
It is, for me, The Dark and the Wicked feels like a parody of an A24 film. It's a movie that tries so hard to be scary and unsettling that it just comes across as comically bad. And and also, I hated this movie so much that the film's official Twitter account called me out one day. It's an absolute dreck of a film. So I'd go with The Babadook because it does everything better than The Dark and the Wicked does.
Right.
It's like it has an iconic creature that is still
The
hugely
kid, you
popular.
mean? Little kid's annoying as fuck.
Oh, well, that's the thing though. Like I can understand people thinking that the kid is annoying, but I think that's purposely how it is because it's a movie that like a lot of films on this tournament deals with grief, but also the struggles with motherhood. But I think this film kind of does it extremely well. It has a brilliant performance from the two leads in it. And again, has a memorable creature. And it's just incredibly unnerving as a film. And of course, as an Aussie, I have to go with it because it's an Australian film. But I think of the two, The Babadook, great film. Dark and the Wicked, just a horrible, miserable piece of shit of a film.
Wow, this is a little personal there.
I have a lot of venom against that film. I apologize.
All right. Gabe, what do you say?
Well, I'm biased because I'm Facebook friends with one of the actresses from The Dark and the Wicked. So The Babadook to me was Hereditary before Hereditary. It's kind of ground zero, I think. And it was the last time that a movie genuinely unnerved me in a way that I felt very vulnerable to the film. It was absolutely effective and thrilling and emotional. And for that reason, I've kind of stayed away from the movie ever since. It was a one-off, which I like rewatchability to my movies, but you have to respect the power of that film. Yes, the kid is annoying, and that is obviously deliberate, and it's been kind of driving me crazy that people use that as a con against the movie when it speaks to these themes about how ugly the grieving process can be, how ugly trauma can be. And The Babadook might be my favorite movie monster of the 2010s. So that is, a simple choice for me, The Babadook.
All right. Jack?
Yeah, Babadook. It's got to be The Babadook all day, 100% Babadook.
Short and sweet. Wonderful. Marcus, what do you say?
Babadook is kind of like the ground zero. It is. I gotta agree with that. But I also support that movie because it really just speaks volumes to something that a lot of people, or at least a lot of creators, well, I'm gonna say a lot, I'll say half of the creators don't particularly focus on as far as a theme, even though it's kind of depicted in a lot of their movies. There's substance to it, but not as much substance as it should be when it comes to that particular topic. And I'm, of course, talking about, grieving and trauma and mental illness. And and like I said, I didn't say that yet, but I'm saying it right now. The kid's annoying, yes, but kids are annoying. And everything in that film,
that's a fact,
is designed to just put forth this scary and terrifying just entity wrapped around something that we as human beings cannot avoid. And it's it really just speaks volumes for just how immense that is, especially within the person feeling it and those around them. So I got to go with The Babadook on that one.
All right, well said. Garrett, where do you stand?
Uh-oh.
Garrett doesn't stand.
Is Garrett the last vote on this one?
No, we still got Matt and Brian.
Oh no,
we lost Garrett.
Garrett
we lost
left.
Garrett.
You made him mad.
Okay, Matt.
He's back. He's back.
I'm back. Sorry
Okay.
about that. I was
Go ahead,
starting
Garrett.
to get into robot mode. It was starting to just keep going and
Oh
going.
yeah, we don't like that. We've been there before.
Yeah. All right. So this is a pretty easy one for me. The Babadook is one of those movies to me that was a slow burn movie that I like, but the conclusion of it was a huge letdown for me. A lot of the
Lance got the giggles. It's over now.
Oh
I don't know
boy.
what to tell you guys.
Once he gets going with that, it's over. It's just letting everybody know.
A lot of the praise that people lay on Ty West this year is the same praise I've been laying on Brian Bertino for the last decade and a half. I think he is one of our best horror directors to come along in quite a while. I just rewatched The Dark and the Wicked since it first came out. I rewatched it a couple of weeks ago. The scares in that movie just really hold up for me. I love that movie to pieces. And I think I was the one who actually put it in this tournament. So I'm going Dark and the Wicked. Easy.
I did too. No, I did too.
Mhm.
All right. Matt, where do you stand?
So the fact that Garrett nominated The Dark and the Wicked probably explains why I hated it so much. I'm in Bede's camp where I spent the whole duration going, is this someone either trying way too hard to be A24, or did A24 just pass this off to a second unit? Whereas The Babadook is one of maybe 5 movies I've seen in a theater, specifically a horror film, where I slept with some form of light on in my vicinity. I was living by myself at the time, so it was considerably more frightening. And as a father now of 2 young boys, I can say 100% that kids are annoying.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I'm now on the mother's side definitively. But yeah, I have to go with The Babadook. I think that would be on in this whole tournament, probably top 3.
All right. Brian, what do you say? It doesn't matter, but let's hear you out anyway.
Okay. I definitely have to go with The Babadook. It's definitely one of the cornerstones in elevated horror. I think Jennifer Kent, when you bring up someone brought up women directing horror movies, I think her name gets deservedly brought up.
Yeah.
So I have to go with the Babadook.
Nice.
All right. So the Babadook is gonna take this bracket here. Let me write it down here. All right. Next, we're gonna head over to one of my favorite movies over the last 10 years, The Lighthouse, going against A Girl Walks Home Alone. So we're gonna go in reverse order now here. Brian, we'll start with you.
Fuck The Lighthouse. A
What
Girl
the
Walks Home
fuck,
Alone
man?
at night.
Jesus
I'm not gonna say too much about it because we're gonna review it here in a couple of weeks. But there's so much to that movie that I love.
That's Batman versus the Green Goblin. Come on, dude.
Fuck that movie.
That's fucked up.
All right, I think we know Brian's pick.
Okay, so now let's go to Matt.
God, I hear so much of fuck X that I'm expecting the Iron Sheik to appear on this podcast. I am 100% going to go with The Lighthouse. I feel about The Lighthouse the way a lot of people felt about The Witch, where I was like its biggest champion for at least the 6 months where nobody could watch it in my vicinity. And I was always telling people to go watch it, go to the theater, go see it. Don't watch any trailers. And I think it's elevated also by being in black and white alone. I think that kind of, people can argue is that adding some pretentiousness to it. But I think it makes it actually that much more unsettling because everything is so drab to begin with when you look at the production design and you look at just how gross everything looks. Like everything feels so lived in that I would probably put The Lighthouse. I think that's my favorite in this entire tournament. Or it's number 2. I think there's one other one that I could argue is my favorite, but I can't champion this one hard enough.
So The Lighthouse. Okay, wonderful. Garrett, what do you say?
Well, I want to go with The Lighthouse too, and I'm pretty sure I would have gone with it otherwise, but I gotta admit, I haven't seen A Girl Walks Home Alone. So, but other than everything that Matt says, though, I completely co-sign. I love that movie. I just love the way it builds. I love the atmosphere of it. It's so well done. So The Lighthouse.
Okay, Marcus.
Well, The Lighthouse is, it's one of those films that you come across every once in a while, where you can't help but to just want to continuously interact with it in some kind of way, whether it be like watch it or talk about it or write about it or be about anything about it, you are on board. And The Lighthouse is definitely one of those films for me. Just bleakly beautiful, just a descent into just righteous black and white purgatory. The performances are great, the imagery is great, everything about it is just as artistic in presentation, but also hugely intellectual as a film can be. It deserves all this praise, its accolades, and wildly enough, it's still fairly underrated. Like a lot of people still haven't really heard of this movie, and every time because I definitely recommend it. I recommend it to everybody. I tell everybody to watch The Lighthouse, watch The Lighthouse. So it's because it's one of those films that needs to be and should be talked about like all the time. So it's just one of those movies, and I love it. So yeah, I'm going with The Lighthouse.
All right, Jack, what do you say?
I'm also The Lighthouse. Yeah, just a great theatrical experience, unique, kind of subversive. Yeah, not much beyond that. I like that movie a lot more than A Girl Walks Home. I've rewatched The Lighthouse a couple of times. I haven't done that with the other movie. And yeah, you know what? Let's also credit this movie for maybe being part of the reason that Robert Pattinson is Batman right now. So I'll take that all day.
I think that's a huge reason for sure. Getting out of that kind of like that teen heartthrob mode that he was in, going into a more serious actor.
Right.
For sure. Gabe, what do you say?
Yeah, I dig The Lighthouse. I dig it for a lot of the reasons that people have laid out. Two really fantastic performances, especially Willem Dafoe, a really great claustrophobic setting, really both serene and haunting cinematography. But something about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night really clicked with me. And it's a movie that I didn't expect much from, as opposed to The Lighthouse, which was a very hyped thing if you were in that A24 sort of a circle. But A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, it has this great subversive idea at the heart of it, and the way it's just fleshed out with so much rich detail, both in characters and in this world of this kind of parallel universe version of Iran where I guess the Ayatollah doesn't rule over. It almost felt like a graphic novel or a comic book. I think it might have actually started out that way. And it is a vampire movie that it definitely does have claim to be a real elevated horror film. I think it's a really undersung film in the genre, so I'm going to go with that. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
All right, here we go. Bede, what do you say?
Yeah, I definitely really enjoyed A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, but I'm definitely giving the edge to The Lighthouse. Like everyone's already said already, it's an incredibly atmospheric film. It's visually stylish. The performances from both Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are fantastic. And it's definitely a movie, like, even if you've only ever seen it once, it just lingers with you long after you've seen it. So I'm definitely giving my vote for this one.
All right, and Don, not that it matters, but I still want to hear your opinion on this particular bracket.
Yeah, I'm gonna be that guy. I don't consider The Lighthouse horror, so I'm going Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
What are you talking? Come on, man. I'm gonna push the buzzer on you on this one because no, everything about The Lighthouse is creepy as fuck. It's atmospheric.
It's atmospheric, but I don't consider it horror. I don't consider it that type of psychological horror. To me, it's not a horror film. I don't consider that horror movie, so I'm going Girl Walks Home.
All right, okay. Fair enough.
Well, The Lighthouse won anyway, so.
All right.
There is that.
Right.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay. I couldn't last a day in that fucking lighthouse. I'll be honest with you. I just couldn't. So it's scary enough for me. Next, this is an interesting matchup here because, again, we're talking about the parameters of, this kind of topic that we're talking about, elevated horror. We got The Exorcist against The Silence of the Lambs. So that's going to be interesting. So we'll start with Don. We'll go in reverse order again. Don, well, what do you say? The Exorcist versus The Silence of the Lambs.
Oof, this is tough. I can make a case that Exorcist is probably the poster child for this, or not poster child, but like the starting point for like elevated horror. There's a case to be made for that. Silence of the Lambs is kind of on the outskirts. It was one that I appreciate where it comes from, and I do really like it. But it was always another one that was like I had to rewatch it to figure out where it falls on the genre. But at the end of the day, I'm still going Exorcist.
All right, one's for The Exorcist. All right, Bede, what do you say?
I'm just going to say this right now before I give my vote. Lance, you son of a bitch. These were two of my picks, and you decided to put them together.
Well, it happens. It's random.
It does.
It's random.
It is true. That is true. But
there you go.
this is a hard one because both of these movies are definitely kind of the precursor of the elevated horror genre, because you got The Silence of the Lambs, which is still to this very day the only horror film to have won Best Picture at the Oscars. It's a classic of classics. And it's also, like a lot of films, it's a movie when it came out, even though everyone involved with the making of it, including its director, Jonathan Demme, had said multiple times that it is a horror film, everyone in the lead up, when it came out and also its Oscar success, kept referring to it as a thriller. So basically that's kind of like the early indication of it, like the elevated horror movement. But then again, you have The Exorcist, which was the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture, but also it is the precursor to what we know as elevated horror today, because at least a good hour of that movie is basically, it's a drama with subtle supernatural things, and then eventually it becomes full-blown horror. And then every other horror film that's in this tournament since its release would have been inspired by that film, or even, Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, and all these other filmmakers would have said multiple times that their film was inspired by The Exorcist, or had they made comparisons to it. So if I had to choose for myself, as much as The Silence of the Lambs is one of my all-time favorites, if I'm going by which has had the more impact between the two, it's going to be The Exorcist, begrudgingly.
Okay, The Exorcist. Trying to pick your favorite kids. I don't know if you have kids, or I don't know if you do have kids or not, but whatever.
As long as it's not the kid in the Babadook.
So next we go to Gabe. What say you?
He gets smart.
These are two powerhouse movies, and this seems like a very classic question, not just within elevated horror, but horror in general. Like comparing to the greatest entries of that genre. Silence of the Lambs is it's always been a film that I've felt very distanced from personally. I admire that movie a lot. I admire the direction, the performances, although I think Anthony Hopkins feels more like a James Bond villain to me than any sort of a cannibal or serial killer, but I get that's part of the appeal. No, The Exorcist, that movie hits a raw nerve for me. And I think a lot of what I said about the Babadook, you can put it on The Exorcist. And in addition, you got some iconic characters. To me, Father Karras is one of the most underrated protagonists in horror history. And you got Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow. I just, when I picture the word classic, I think of The Exorcist. So I got to give it to that, The Exorcist.
All right, The Exorcist, another one. Okay, Jack?
Yeah, impossible fucking decision, Lance. Go fuck yourself. First off,
he's taking a lot of those today, which is good.
Unbelievable.
This episode's gonna be titled "Everybody Hates Lance."
Yeah. I don't know. Silence of the Lambs to me feels more subversive. Like it feels more specifically trying to be what it is, but like hide the elements of what it's doing. I mean, there's a scene where a guy fucking like blows a load and throws it on a woman, but it's this movie won Best Picture, There's like a gothic dungeon in the movie. A guy wears another guy's face at one point. There's somebody who seems to have like gender confusion. Like there's a lot of like very high concept ideas and like metaphors in a movie that has a lot of like rawness and ugliness. And I feel like that's that elevated thing.
Yeah.
They're both classics. Like to me, these are both 10 on 10s. They're movies that I've rewatched endlessly, but I think Silence of the Lambs feels more like what elevated horror is right now. Even though I do agree that Exorcist is probably, ground zero for what this started as, or like what A24 is aiming for whenever they make a movie like this.
Sure.
So Silence of the Lambs for me.
All right. Silence of the Lambs. Okay, Marcus.
I mean, they're both just complete, masterful works when it comes to this genre in a lot of ways, and they've both done a significant amount of just, raising the bar of what, horror movies can be and what they are today. And without either one of them, I don't think we would be where we are today when it comes to content. Or if we were, it would be a bit more distinctive than it is now. So, I mean, I have more of an experience with The Exorcist than Silence of the Lambs, even though I love Silence of the Lambs. I still remember when the director's cut for The Exorcist came out in theaters.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the best theater experiences I've ever had. Not because it's a great movie, but because it still shocked a majority of people in the theater who half of them probably already seen it. And even just, revisiting it still, sends a chill down your spine. It still is very unsettling and, just completely like gut wrenching and in a lot of ways. So it's even after all these years, it still holds a power over us as movie lovers and critics and the trends and elevated horror and everything like that. And it's a pinnacle of storytelling. So I got to go with The Exorcist.
All right. Next we go to Garrett.
Yeah, when I looked at these brackets earlier today at work, I was like, oh my God, I knew this was going to be the hardest decision yet. This entire set of brackets here. Look, The Exorcist has a power to it that is just, if you go, there were stories when that movie had come out that, people were running out screaming and throwing up and whatnot and leaving the theater. And that is a power you cannot define. And it, like people said, it was nominated for Best Picture. But Jack laid out exactly what I was going to say about the Silence of the Lambs, and that Silence of the Lambs came out post slasher subgenre of horror. People were not talking about horror. People did not like horror, but people had to admit that this was a horror film. And I think that is the sheer definition of what we're talking about today when you talk about elevated horror. You had big movie stars, you had a big director, and the thing won Best Picture. And Silence of the Lambs, both of these, God, are in my top 10 favorites of all time. But Silence of the Lambs edges that out for me just because of what we're talking about today, the subgenre we're talking about today. It's the definition of it. So Silence of the Lambs for me.
All right, Matt?
So the impossible question for me was choosing which is the better movie, because I think that question is a wash. So I had to come up with my own internal tiebreaker. And I had two factors, ironically. Number one, a lot of us agree that Silence of the Lambs, the vast majority would call it a horror film, but you do have a certain populace that lean more towards the thriller. I think with The Exorcist, that is undisputed a horror movie first and foremost.
Sure.
Yeah.
And secondly, when I look at Silence of the Lambs, that template, it may be the best of that genre, the serial killer chasing a killer, using a killer to find a killer. We've had stuff like Mindhunter come out since Silence of the Lambs, not Manhunter, for those of you who are listening. I think we have yet to have a Exorcist movie, a possession movie, that has come close to capturing the provocative nature of The Exorcist 50 years later.
Oh, just wait for David Gordon Green to get a hold of it.
Well, for the record, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we are covering it. Yeah.
The 50-year anniversary is this year, so Garrett and I are doing that as a retrospective. So way to show your fucking head, Garrett, with your 10 out of 10 score. But for those reasons, I will give this to The Exorcist. But it's a very close call.
All right, and Brian.
The Exorcist, it's one of those movies that sets the bar, not just for elevated horror, religious horror, just movies in general. It's one of the greatest movies ever. But I think for this subject of elevated horror, this ever-changing definition, I feel like every round, I think Silence of the Lambs is going to get my vote.
Okay. Regardless, The Exorcist moves on. So, speaking of controversial, the next matchup, we might get the buzzer ready because We got. It's gonna go right back to that whole foreign horror thing I brought up earlier, which is it's just different artistic sensibilities for those particular filmmakers. Does that make it elevator horror? We'll see right now. We got Martyrs, the original, not the Katie Holmes ones that came out like 2 years ago. I think Katie Holmes was in it. I remember.
Naomi Watts.
Oh, Naomi Watts.
Or
Yeah.
wait, for
Wait,
which one?
she's in all the
For
remakes.
the Martyrs remake.
Oh no, I don't know who's in that one.
And it's going up against another movie that just recently got remade, Goodnight Mommy, the original.
There she is, Brian.
Yeah, I got confused.
So we'll start with Jack on this one.
I lean Martyrs on this. I think that Martyrs was a really tough movie for me to watch. I actually watched it a couple of years ago. I was doing a 365 movie a year challenge, and that came up and was one of those that I watched it, and I had an idea for what I was in for. I heard it was a very extreme movie, but I had no anticipation of like the message of that movie, which I thought was fascinating and like really deep and nihilistic, kind of in like the Lars von Trier vein of things. But weirdly, this movie felt like it had more to say and was darkly optimistic, and I didn't expect that from this movie. And
optimistic.
yeah, like it's fucked up, and it's got a brutal ending and a brutal story, but there's something about it too that I don't know. But I'm going Martyrs. I think it fits with the conversation we've been trying to like kind of wade our way through this whole night. I think it belongs in this genre, and I think it's a pretty strong candidate for that, even if it would also qualify for a different section of horror.
For the vulgar, what was it, Gabe? Vulgar auteur? What the fuck was
vulgar auteur.
Yes, yes. Anyways, Gabe, since we have you, what do you say?
Yeah, I was wrestling with the question of is Martyrs elevated, because it is. I mean, it's deep. But I think more people think of it as torture porn, and I've never heard those two subgenres being overlapped at all. But but that might be the power of Martyrs. I mean, for as disturbing as it is, it's a potent movie. It's a powerful fucking movie. And it's deeply unsettling and traumatizing. But like Jack said, it's not a Lars von Trier thing. It like goes beyond that and actually tries to look beyond the darkness, which is the only reason why I would even entertain watching it. So I think it's way too much of a beast for me to not give it the point in this matchup. So I have to give it to Martyrs.
All right, and thank you for taking off your Astros hat, by the way, because I'm a Dodger fan over here.
I'll get it out.
Hey, let me know if I'm about to go find mine.
Bede, what do you say?
Well, I think if anyone who has followed me over the years would know that I am not a fan of Martyrs. I think the movie's a bit of a mess, and I don't think it's as deep as or intelligent as it thinks it is. And it's definitely it's definitely more of a French extremity film than elevated horror. But it's a movie that thinks it's elevated horror, hence why I think it's not as clever as it thinks it is. Goodnight Mommy, the ending is very predictable because I completely saw that one coming, but I found that one far more engaging because of the performances. It's very well made and it's very unsettling. And to me, I think it's just the better overall movie. So yeah, I'd go with Goodnight Mommy on this one.
All right, Garrett, Goodnight Mommy or Martyrs?
Yeah, Martyrs is again, as Jack laid out, it's a real experience watching that movie, and it's another one of those, the less you know, the better. Goodnight Mommy was the exact opposite of the Babadook for me, where it had a nice payoff and it had two non-annoying kids. So I'm going Goodnight Mommy by a hair, but it is Goodnight Mommy for me.
All right,
I nominated this one, so I got to go with it.
All right, Marcus.
I accidentally recommended this movie to a few of my friends, and we all kind of watched it together. I had never seen it before.
Martyrs?
Yeah, Martyrs.
Mom.
Yeah, sorry, I should have just said that first. But yeah, and it was one of those experiences where everyone pretty much hated me afterwards. So and didn't want me to ever pick anything ever again, and didn't want me to do anything with them ever again. And not even because the movie is as bold and striking and very unpleasant as it is, but because I was the only one who was happy about it. Because for me, I was watching a film that very uncompromising, very untethered, and just completely just like punch you in your face kind of horror that just is what I was looking for at the time, but everybody else detested. So, Martyrs, despite its unpleasant subject matter, will always have another special place in my heart. So I'm going with Martyrs.
Okay. All right, 3-2. Matt, where do you stand?
I'll get my fuck X out of the way now. Fuck Martyrs. I hate that movie with every ounce of fiber being. So I will go with Goodnight Mommy by default.
All right, we're tied up again. Don, break this tie.
Yeah, I'm going Martyrs. Goodnight Mommy is fun. I agree. Even though the twist is kind of obvious, it's still really pretty fun to get there. But Martyrs to me is one of the cornerstones of the early hallmarks of the genre. One of those that you can retroactively put it in there. And overall, I think it's a better made movie, despite what Bede thinks. So I'm going Martyrs.
All right. And Brian?
I'm going to have to go with the one that stuck with me the most, and that was Martyrs. Just everything that happened in that movie and then that ending. I think when we reviewed it, we all kind of had different interpretations of what the ending meant and what was going on in the movie. So I have to go Martyrs.
All right, good. So Martyrs moves on. We're down to 2 more matchups here. So the next matchup is The Nightingale versus a complete. This what is it? One Cut of the Dead.
Oh.
So Matt, we'll start with you for this round.
For different reasons.
Matt, The Nightingale or One Cut of the Dead?
I thought One Cut of the Dead was a couple tweaks away from being great. There's a few issues I have with the way that film was plotted. So I'm going to go with The Nightingale. That was a very pleasant surprise, and I'm glad someone advocated for it to be on this list. I don't know who that was, but I think he's sitting in this room with me.
All right.
The Nightingale was a pleasant surprise. Matt Goudreau.
Yeah,
just want to make sure I heard that
feel
correctly.
Yes, good.
All right. Jack, what do you say?
One Cut of the Dead, just because I like movies that I actually get to have a good time with. So I'm going to go with that one.
Okay. Marcus?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with The Nightingale on this one. It's another supremely dark and grisly meditation on what humanity is capable of. And it's so real in its horror that it definitely hits you on a lot of different levels, a lot of distinct levels. And I remember it, all parts of it to this day. It's definitely not the type of film you ever watch more than once, but it's definitely the kind of film that will kind of definitely stick with you. And if we're, talking about, higher or elevated horror, it's definitely got to be the ones that stick with you in some kind of way.
Right.
And that's definitely one of them. So.
All right. Garrett.
Man, The Nightingale's a rough watch. It is a rough watch. That being said, it sticks with you. And One Cut of the Dead, it's probably one of the more, as Jack said, one of the more fun movies on this list. But The Nightingale, I remember I saw that opening weekend, and I was talking about it for weeks after. I really, really enjoyed that film, and I'm scared of America remakes it because the themes that are explored in that movie are just untouchable. I love The Nightingale, so it's that one for me.
The Nightingale. Okay, Gabe, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, another Jennifer Kent movie, The Nightingale. I was a big admirer of that movie, and I am glad to see it represented here. It's one of the few movies on this list to truly embrace on-screen violence, but also not glorify it. It's kind of like Martyrs in that way for me, how extreme it gets, but I think it's even more profound than Martyrs. I think it really explores a lot of fascinating ideas, but also great like dynamics and relationships. I think the relationship between our two like sort of dual protagonists, the woman and the man who sort of escorts her to her revenge. That's the thing that actually stuck with me, even more than a lot of the traumatic things that are put on screen. And when I think of elevated horror, I don't just think of like the horrific things that happen. I think of the humanity that you can find after you parse through all the violence. And I think The Nightingale has to win on those merits.
All right, so another one for The Nightingale. Bede, where do you stand?
Yeah, I think as much as I do love One Cut of the Dead because it's hilarious and brilliant and clever, it's definitely The Nightingale for me because as an Aussie, this film definitely hit me a lot more because of what it does with its story about, how based on genocide, colonialism, and knowing my history in Australia. Like I say, it just hit me a lot more, and especially with the fact that because the film is set in Tasmania, and if knowing my history, because basically a lot of Indigenous Australian tribes were basically wiped out in Tasmania because of British soldiers. So this film definitely showcases the real horror. Like, I guess some could make the argument it's not a full-blown horror film, but I think the fact that it deals with actual real horrific events definitely classifies it as a horror film for me in a different way. So, but it's a horror film through and through, and it's just brilliantly well made by Jennifer Kent. So that's the one I'm voting for.
All right, wonderful. And Brian?
I have to also go with The Nightingale. The situations that happen in the movie are not ones that I care to rewatch in certain movies, but I think it was definitely a good follow-up for Jennifer Kent, and I'm not a big fan of One Cut of the Dead. I probably do need to rewatch it, but I just knowing off the first time watching it, I just was not a fan of it. So the Nightingale.
Okay, so The Nightingale moves on, and we are.
Did Don vote?
Oh,
It doesn't matter. I was Nightingale anyway.
Okay, sorry, Don.
Okay.
I'm drinking and I'm buzzing, so I'm sorry. It's on me. So we're gonna move on to our final match here in the first round. The films are A Dark Song and Mother with an exclamation point there. So we'll start with you, Don. What do you think of this matchup?
There's two films on this list that I want to fire into the sun. I cannot.
It's Lance's fault.
No, it's both of these films' fault for enraging me so much. I fucking hate both of these movies. Oh God. I hate these films with a fury that would level an entire solar system if I was to ever unleash my full thoughts on them.
Write essays on them.
I've tried. I don't have the finger strength.
Broken too many phones.
Mother infuriated me less. I'm going with that one.
All right, one for Mother. Bede, are you as upset at these films as Don is?
Actually, no, I'm not. I like the fact that A Dark Song is on here, but I actually think it's a bit underrated, that film, personally. But if I had to choose between both of them, I'm definitely going with Mother because it got such a visceral reaction out of me when I first watched it. And, Darren Aronofsky, he's a very divisive filmmaker, but I like the fact that he is because, I always get something out of his films every time I watch them. So it's definitely Mother for me in this round.
Okay, 2 for Mother here. Gabe?
Oh, Darren Aronofsky. That movie did provoke an emotion out of me, and that emotion was being annoyed just throughout the entire runtime, just really not enjoying my experience. A Dark Song, which was my pick, I do think it's underrated, and it dealt with that grieving process in a much more interesting way than I think a lot of bigger elevated movies do. I think there's a lot of toxicity and a lot of manipulation that's explored, but I also think that there is a sincerity that this movie wears on its sleeve about just how much it believes sort of in its own mission statement of what if we could communicate with the dead? What if we could bring people back? I don't know. It was a really fascinating watch for me, and I just want to, champion an underdog. So yeah, a Dark Song.
All right, Jack.
Yeah, I'm a big Aronofsky fan. Mother is a wild movie. I really liked the ride, and I did like it more than the Dark Song. So it's Mother for me. One of the more fun theatrical experiences I can remember. I think it was, not that the theater was full, but I think it was pretty much 50-50 split from people who were there. There were a bunch of like elderly folks who somehow sat through the whole movie and just like loudly complained, all like walking all the way down the ramp. Just, I don't know about that. I don't know what's wrong with people, that kind of thing. And then, me and a couple other people just like, yeah, it's pretty fucking nuts. Pretty fucking nuts. So I don't know. Mother for me, I like it.
All right, Marcus.
Movie. What did we just watch, Ed?
Yeah. As they go to find some tapioca somewhere at 8:30 at night, it's that kind of thing.
Marcus.
Where we really went there.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though I don't think it's, Aronofsky's, strongest film, I'll have to go with Mother as well. Dark Song is good, but Mother was just such a, I don't even now, I don't really know what the fuck it was, but it was still something that I was invested in, and it kept my eye on the screen, like at everything at all times. And even though I don't have as much fun analyzing that movie as, some of the other picks we have here, it still is, again, something that really stuck with me. So yeah, I'm going to go with Mother.
I'm sure there's plenty of, 3-hour YouTube video essays on that movie, so people don't understand what's going on.
They're all over the place.
All right, Garrett.
I'm not a big fan of Aronofsky. I'm not a big fan of Dark Song, so this was a weird choice for me. I will say, though, the conversations that Mother started, very rarely has a movie hit like that, where you had people who either really dug it or really hated it. A Dark Song's fine, but it didn't really leave that much of an impression on me when I watched it. And so I'm going to go, much to my own chagrin, I'm going to go ahead and go Mother, just because, man, the visceral reaction that people have to that movie is something that I will always freely endorse.
All right, Matthew. See, I'm buzzing because I said Matthew now. It's been Matt the whole time, but now I'm saying Matthew. So either or, it works. I think.
Yeah, they both work, which is more than I can say for either of these movies. I don't like either one, and Darren Aronofsky reminds me of that.
So much hate, man.
Yeah, I'm just seething with anger tonight. I don't know why, but the Darren Aronofsky is that kid in class who's like, I know I should be upset about something, but I don't know exactly what, so I'm just going to be very loud to illustrate my point.
That's great.
And I feel like he has something against me personally because he's only made one movie I've liked, and everything else I have just...
What was that, Noah?
No, The Wrestler is the only movie of his I really like.
Randy the Ram.
The Wrestler, and I thought The Fountain was a glorified Skittles commercial, on top of some other things. And I can't believe The Whale is getting all these good reviews because I think it's a steaming pile of garbage. But I will go with The Dark Song because Mother, I was one of those people who, I think I called Garrett after it was done. Not that we reviewed it, but I just needed someone to rant to because I saw it by myself. Nobody else was in the theater because I went to like a 10 o'clock showing, and I didn't drag Christian to go see it because I explained what it was about. He's like, that sounds so fucking dumb. And I'm like, oh yeah, you should have seen the movie. So I'm going with The Dark Song. Me and Aronofsky don't get along. We had a good one night together. It was fun while it lasted, and then after that, he kept writing me, and I just throw them in the fire when I get his postcards.
All right, Brian.
I'm gonna have to go with Dark Song. Just that one stuck with me a lot more than Mother. I thought certain things just kind of stuck out to me. The subject matter, the atmosphere, the score kind of just gave me an eerie vibe. And Mother, it was something to talk about, but after we did our review on it, like what 5-6 years ago, I haven't talked or seen that movie since then. So I have to go with A Dark Song.
Do we have a tie?
I think so. Does this one come down to Pedro?
I had Mother winning by one.
Okay.
But I could-
Are we sure? Let's be sure. This is important.
Is it?
We only.
Yeah. Might as well move on to the next round, right?
Okay, Mother. We got Mother winning.
All right, Mother gets it.
Yeah.
Exclamation.
5-minute pee break, guys.
Sure.
I'm down with that. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I can deal with that.
Part 3.